Welcome back to the Christianity and Business Podcast, an initiative of the Archie W. Dunham College of Business at Houston Baptist University. I'm your host, Darren Shearer, and this is the show that helps Christian business leaders to integrate biblical values into business. On this episode, we're joined by Mike Zigarelli. Mike is a professor of leadership and strategy at Messiah College and former dean of the Regent University School of Business. That's actually my alma mater. I attended divinity school there. Didn't get to experience the business school as much, but I know he made a great impact while he was there. His research in the fields of management, practical theology, and sports ministry has appeared in a number of scholarly journals and magazines, and he's the author of 12 books, including one we're going to really hone in on today called Christian-Owned Companies. Another books, Influencing Like Jesus, The Messiah Method, and Management by Proverbs. And his work has been translated into several languages. He's also the creator of assessyourself.org, assess-yourself.org, and Christianity 9 to 5. You can go to Christianity 9, spell out 5.org. And just got great resources there for a ton of video content. He's doing a great job of producing that, and serves as a management consultant for churches and schools. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Well, it's wonderful to be on, Darren. Thanks for having me on.
Well, this is an incredible research project you have undertaken and completed. 50 companies, 50 Christian-owned companies. You know, typically when somebody asks, what's an example of a Christian-owned company? Some of the, as you said, the usual suspects like Chick-fil-A, Hobby Lobby, they tend to come to top of mind, but there are many others. And I think as a business owner myself, and for those listening, all of us marketplace Christians, we need these examples. We need these heroes to look up to, and these examples of how their leaders are living out their faith and really cultivating these Christ-centered cultures, corporate cultures. So this is a question, Mike, that you love to ask your students, and sounds like frequently you get kind of that deer in the headlights response when you ask it. But practically speaking, what does it look like when a follower of Christ runs a business?
Well, I guess I spent 70,000 words answering that question in this book. So try to boil this down to sound bites, or at least something that fits on a podcast here. Let me just start by saying that the goal of the project was really less to provide inspirational examples and more just to try to understand that question from an academic and to some extent practical standpoint. There are a number of resources out there, dozens, maybe even hundreds of resources out there on faith at work and faith in leadership and business and management. But there isn't much, despite that, there doesn't seem much theory. I mean, what is the real answer to this question? How do believers run their businesses? You can find a lot of individual books on that from individual companies or CEOs, and you can find plenty of biblical exegesis on that. But what I was after here was to just take the standard social science methodology of looking across organizations to see how people do something. And that's what I did. We looked at, first it was going to be 30 companies, then it went to 40, and ultimately we landed at 50 companies. Faith-based, run by Christians, intentionally running it to try to honor God. What does it mean on Monday morning when these people go to work? What are they actually doing? And what we, in a very brief way, what we found were that there were essentially 8 expressions of the Christian faith across these 50 companies. Some of them may be quite obvious to many of your listeners, whether it's proselytization, evangelizing, using business as a platform to introduce people to God, or using their profits in a way that funds faithful causes. There are expressions with regard to their people, to their employees. treating them like family, what they do with their benefits and their wages and their work environment and so on. Their expressions with regard to the environment and using businesses to honor God by being sustainable and caring for His creation, and many others. But the point here was to develop that theory out of what people are already doing, rather than just trying to take my exegesis and saying normatively this is how one ought to run a business from a Judeo-Christian perspective.
Hmm. So out of these 50, were there any that you really felt met all of the criteria, or which one would you give A plus or how many of these would you give an A plus on their how they meet the criteria for this definition?
Well, frankly, I think that might be the wrong metaphor in a way, because I wouldn't say that in order to be pleasing God, we need to be doing all 8 of the things that we write about in this book. In fact, if you go deeply with 1 or 2, that may be just as God honoring as somebody who checks all of these boxes. So, I mean, it's easy to say these usual suspects of Chick-fil-A and Hobby Lobby, Interstate Battery, who across the board seem to take care of their people and their planet and their philanthropy and so on. But there are companies out there that their sole purpose is to create jobs in environments where people would not have jobs otherwise. It might be in Honduras. It might be in Africa. It might be for felons in Chicago. It might be for the homeless in just outside of Atlanta, like some of these companies do here. And that can be as pleasing to God, I think, as some of these other organizations that are more multifaceted. So I guess I would maybe take issue with the premise that in order to be a bona fide, faithful Christian company, or Christian-owned company is probably the better term to use here, that you have to do all of these things. Really, I think the centerpiece is where your heart is and what your motivation is, and trying to honor God through how you operate.
Yeah. And in a lot of ways, at least in my mind, it would be like if you're expecting a company to max out in all of these categories, it would be like expecting an individual Christian to max out in all of the spiritual gifts on a spiritual gifts inventory. You know, that you've got to be perfect in your gift of administration and mercy and leadership and all of the different gifts that are indicated in the Bible. But so I wonder how much of the this aspect of spiritual gifts plays into this, because it seems like every leader, every company is going to kind of emphasize something different. And you see this all across the faith of work movement. You know, you have some that are very HR kind of servant leadership focused, and then you have others that are really it's the how they evangelize and kind of share the gospel with their employees. And so everything, it's not that anyone is necessarily better, but that everybody just tends to kind of emphasize something different. Have you found that?
And I think that's an excellent analogy. Whether it's all the spiritual gifts or all the parts of the body, or whatever metaphor you'd want to use there. What explains the variance, though, I believe, in the different priorities of different Christian-owned companies is probably the tradition that the owner comes out of, or the family, or what have you. Those who are more evangelical in their disposition, they're probably going to see their business more as a platform for introducing people to God. They're going to do many other things as well, but that's going to be high on the priority list. Whereas I found that some who come out of more the mainline Protestant perspectives, very much of a focus on serving people and lifting people up out of poverty and social justice and so on. And again, it's not that we ought to be elevating any one of these expressions over any other, but the variety of traditions from which these business owners come from, I think, explains the variety of expressions of the faith.
So, what are maybe two or three of your favorite examples? Maybe some of the lesser known examples of these Christian-owned companies.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple here. There's a company up in New Hampshire called TurboCam International, which makes parts, whether it's for GM or for the space station, but it's computer-aided manufacturing. They've taken many of their resources, and then the owner there, the founder, Marian Naranha is his name, and he went over to Nepal and he found that people were in slavery there, and he's going to take the resources from this company and buy people out of slavery. And he did it so much that he got traction among the people there. And eventually the king of Nepal said, enough is enough. We're ending slavery. I mean, their company contributed to the end of slavery in a country half a world away. You're taking your resources and your love of God and you're doing something with it that would never be done except for the fact that you created wealth through your company. That's one example. Another example, at Stanford University, a few Christians and a few others started building solar-powered lights for people who couldn't afford any kind of lighting, fans, energy in their huts around the world. And they built them high quality but very low price, so that now about 100 million people who would not have energy around the world do, just from having these inexpensive, high-quality solar-powered lights and energy generators in their possessions. The company's called Delight Design. You can look them up. It's a fascinating story, but it came out of just a love for people and a heart for serving those who just have almost nothing in this world. The companies that I wasn't real familiar with before starting this research. Can I give you one or two more, or you?
Yeah, please.
Want to move on? A company called Lehman Luther, which is a Georgia company. It was just a guy who was a carpenter in a truck, building things, fixing, doing remodels. Decided to start hiring some homeless people to help him out, and giving them jobs and giving them some resources, and found that they were pretty good at what they did. Continued to do it more and more. Now he's building high-end furniture, and with a workforce that's almost entirely guys who are homeless or formerly homeless, right? But that was his heart, was to pull people out of poverty by giving them jobs. Companies like this just fascinate me. I get blown away by people who are using capitalism in a way that genuinely serves people, lifts them out of situations that they'd never get out of by trying to rely on a government or even on an under-resourced church. So what we're finding is across these Christian-owned companies that they're doing tremendous societal good in the United States and well beyond.
Beautiful. I love that. And I want to hear some more of those examples. I also wanted to ask you, what surprised you the most in doing this research? Anything that maybe you went into this kind of with a certain hypothesis, and something just really kind of gave you a paradigm shift in this journey?
Well, I tend to write books about things that I don't know rather than things that I do know. I mean, that may sound a little strange, but I just come at it with a question that I want to know the answer to, and then I do some research, and then I publish what I found. So it's essentially going into it with a little bit of ignorance and just sort of an open mind as to, well, let's see where the data leads us. And what surprised me, I think, is that the different expressions of the faith break down pretty neatly into various categories that collectively provide a very practical framework for anybody who wants to know, okay, how do I do this? What does this mean if I'm trying to be a believer in business? Does it just mean I have to close on Sunday? Does it just mean that I have to tithe? Does it just mean I have to be more honest with the IRS? I mean, what does this actually mean? Well, now we have what I think we found here is there's a pretty clean and clear set of expressions, of approaches that believers are using. Now, I don't want to necessarily say that these are normative, because just because people do something doesn't mean that we ought to do them. But the way that they're done looks like a set of best practices that are usable, whether it's from the business practitioner or for the student of business, trying to understand how can I have a seamless life so that Sunday and Monday are not disconnected. So I'm not sure if it surprised me, but the cleanness of the paradigm that came out of this research really did please me.
What were some of the other of your favorite examples from the book?
There's a company called Barnhart Crane and Rigging, which is down in the southeast. And Alan Barnhart he wasn't the founder. He picked up the small company from his parents. But when he started this company, he decided that, and they saw the potential for it to be a very lucrative business. He sat down with his wife and said, "We don't want wealth to get in the way of us honoring God, and money can certainly have a way of doing that." And so they decided that they were going to set their maximum salary at the very beginning and say, we're going to go this far and no farther. And so we can have sort of a middle class way of life for us and for our family. And as the company grew and became a multi-million-dollar business, they didn't go any further than that. They just gave them an opportunity to give away more money. And since then, they have given away hundreds of millions of dollars for evangelistic causes around the world. And in fact, they've given away the entire company. They've taken all the stock, non-voting stock, to a Christian ministry so that they run the company, but they don't own the company anymore. They basically handed over hundreds of millions of dollars that would have been in their bank account, and they're just living on sort of a modest middle-class salary for them and their 6 kids. I am stunned by companies that do that, by people that do that. I just stand in awe of people who are so faithful that they're willing to sacrifice like that in order to, in this case, point more people toward God. So look it up if you're interested in such thing. Barnhart Crane and Rigging is a company like that. U.S. Plastics in Ohio, Stanley Tam is the founder of that company like that, where they've essentially literally handed over the company to God so that more people can know him.
Where did these CEOs, and I don't know how deep you went into the actual owners and founders of these companies, or the CEOs that maybe took it over a few generations later and really started to implement this kind of a culture. But where did they even get a paradigm? I mean, because books like this, as you said earlier, I mean, they weren't really out like decades ago to even share kind of these sort of paradigms for approaching a business in this type of a God honoring way. Where did they even get that kind of a sense?
Well, I guess the supernatural explanation is maybe God put something on their heart and then they lived it out. I was maybe a little surprised as I'm reading through this, a number of CEOs and founders who just had some sort of cause in mind and they went after it without seeing any kind of big picture or doing a whole bunch of research. You know how entrepreneurship can be. It's like, well, let me try this and let's see if it works out. It's something I like to do or something I feel like I should do. And they go, and through trial and error, they eventually make their way. So I don't know that many of them actually studied some sort of sanctioned, well-established paradigm and said, I'm going to follow this model. It's more like Truett Cathy. Let me make the best chicken sandwich I possibly can, and then people will show up. I'm just going to honor God by closing on Sunday and doing a great job the other 6 days. And that's that's generally the storyline of most of the companies that I looked at. It's just I want to create a business and I want to honor God at the same time. Let me do the best I can with that and get some advice along the way. But I think many of them kind of stumbled into these best practices rather than starting with them and then just trying to superimpose them on their business model.
Yeah, that makes sense. And uh, within like the last 30 years or so, there have been organizations starting up like C12 and Convene and some of the others that are discipling these owners and CEOs of Christian owned companies. Did you find that many or most of the CEOs in these profiled companies were were members of organizations like that, to where they could kind of get some of this inspiration and learn some of these best practices from their peers?
Some of them are. I think more and more of them are, but of the ones that I studied, I didn't get the sense that that was central in their life yet. Maybe second and third generation will see more of that because C12 is growing, CNBC, others are growing, and this is it's an essential discipline, I think, for busy business people to have that accountability and that encouragement and to get those good ideas. So, those who are not familiar with the workplace faith organizations out there, that this is a great time to start looking it up. And C12 is actually one of the stories in the books called the C12 Group, and Buck Jacobs, and how they basically built a better mousetrap. They're a better way for Christian business people to be trained and to be encouraged and to just maintain their business acumen and spiritual life simultaneously.
Hmm. And you have a list of 100 best practices of Christian-owned companies in the back of the book. What are some of your favorite ones as we start to wrap it up here? Looking for some of those nuggets that people can take and apply, maybe even today at work.
Goodness, there's so many of them. I mean, whether it's from their integrity in operations, like having fair trade payments to suppliers, or maybe in their advertisements, their models are more modestly dressed, or there are certain things that they won't do in advertising that their competitors will do, or maybe it's their supply chain cares for forests and animals and is serious about creation care. Many of these companies are exceedingly generous, whether building schools or vocational training programs locally or around the world. Someone pay their own employees to work in the local community, giving away whether it's 10% or 20%, or in some cases 100% of the money that doesn't go back into the business toward philanthropic causes. It's really fascinating to see just how generous some of them are. And of course, some of the things like remaining closed on Sunday, or limiting hours on the weekends or in the evenings so that employees can worship or get back to their families. Maybe things like sensitizing managers to the plight of employees by having them do the employees' jobs annually or even quarterly. It's a fascinating way to keep employers, managers sensitive to the hardships and the needs of their employees. We're paying employees a living wage. I mean, like I said, there are 100 of these things in here, and that's not an exhaustive list. But that's what we're after with this book, is just sort of a practical, how do they do it type look at what Christian business owners all across the country seem to be doing these days.
Yeah. And that list of 100 best practices of Christian-owned companies, I mean, that's really worth the price of the book. So encourage everybody to go get a copy on Amazon, also at Christianity9to5.org. That's the number 9 and the number 5.org. Mike, anything else you want to say about what you're working on and where people can learn more about what you're doing?
Well, no, I mean, this is a work in progress. And what I have put together here is a theory based on data, based on what people are actually doing. And I hope that some people find that to be helpful and find it to be useful. It's written in a way that is, I think, accessible to a number of different audiences out there. But it is just a theory, and we need to continue to strive and go forward and understand better the best possible way that we can honor God in our work lives and in our lives generally. So I'd look forward to hearing back from people about other things that they think should be in this theory. Understand, the theology at a deeper level, because we can all learn together and continue to strive toward that more sanctified approach to work and to living.
Yes. And again, Christianity 925.org. You can go and reach out to Mike, let him know what you think, get a copy of the book, and benefit from the lessons he shares in there from these great and enduring companies. Mike, thanks again for your time. We appreciate the heart and the wisdom and expertise you poured into this research and also to this interview today. We're better for it.
Well, thanks very much, Darren.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and if so, we would greatly appreciate it if you would leave us a quick rating and review for the Christianity in Business podcast on iTunes. You can get more information about HBU's Center for Christianity in Business at christianityinbusiness.com. Thanks for listening, and remember to keep integrating biblical values into your business.